I think we've learned a lot about Frostbite and maybe the way it was supposed to cross brand across multiple games. But a lot of people have said that it really hasn't impacted Madden the way that we thought it would. While you were there, this game went from engine to engine to engine. Can you talk to me a little bit about why we don't see those distinct changes in terms of on field play as those engines change?
Without getting into too much detail, it was basically decided that for the sports games, FIFA and Madden, I guess anyone else who moved over to Frostbite, that the gameplay engine would basically be ported over intact. So we wouldn't lose any progress and have to rebuild entire systems from the ground up. The undertaking that it would have taken to shift everything to completely new gameplay engines, animation engines, etc., would have been just astronomical and not something we could have done in a year. And so their kind of like gameplay came over in a box, and it was largely unaffected. The visuals, the presentation, the cameras, and stuff like that. That's what Frostbite really excels at. So that's where they focus most of the initiative. Um, I can't understate to you the impact of three engine changes during my time there and a console transition. It was brutal, and it definitely, I don't want to make excuses, but it definitely impacted how much progress we wanted to make versus how much progress we actually made.
There were a lot of developers that were critical of Frostbite and says that it was not intended for sports games and that it lent itself to a lot of problems. Did you personally see those issues where it was not going to be an engine designed to work well with Madden?
It's not quite like that because most of our stuff came over intact. It's not like had to jump through hoops to make it work. The visuals, I think, lighting and stuff like that got better, in my opinion. So none of those things had a direct impact. It was mainly that the resource allocation it took to port our game to that engine made that almost all our groups internally had to operate with less resources than they normally were used to. And so we were all making less progress than we wanted. And as a side note to all this, I think there were people internally, it goes all the way up to the top, who felt like in order to effectively sell the Frostbite engine in Madden and FIFA, you needed to add something that the Frostbite engine does really well. And that's how the Journey and Longshot were born. Because they knew that Frostbite could do really good cinematics and facial animation, all this stuff from Battlefield, and so they invested heavily there, and that's why you got 2-3 years of sports movies.
How long, to your understanding, was Longshot developed in years?
It's hard to say because really, the only one who was working on it for at least 2 years was Mike Young. He's the guy. He designed it. He scripted it. That was his vision, his initiative, his team all the way. I don't think they started adding people to that until a year, maybe year and a half from when it released. And the amount of content that they were able to create and the amount of time they had was staggering. I don't know how they pulled it off. And don't forget, they were also working on a new engine and a team that had almost zero familiarity with building cinematic sequences. So it's pretty staggering what they were able to pull off, considering.
Something that you pretty much said kind of pulled resources away or maybe have made things more difficult for you to get the things that you wanted to do. This is a game mode that back in NFL Madden 18 was actually led in terms of what they marketed to.
How far back can we go here? The entire decade before me was known as the one and done era. When they put a feature in and the next they'd market it and the next year they'd pull it back out again. They unfortunately, that team has a 2-decade history of being very short-sighted and investing heavily in the thing that they're going to go big on that year, and then a year or two later it's gone. And there's a million of examples of this. I'm not going to go through the list. There's entire YouTube videos talking about the one and done years. I'm hopeful that Mike and his team are leveraging a lot of the work that they did towards Longshot to make that new player mode, a QB1 thing they've been talking about, into something special. Now, for me personally, I'm not into like cinematics and non like movies. I don't want to play stuff. I don't want to watch it. But I know there's a lot of people who enjoy it, and I know if the execution is good on that create a player cinematic mode, give them enough time, give them 2 to 3 years of building on this, QB1 feature they're talking about, and maybe you might have the best player mode in sports gaming, and I'm all in on that.